Hopefully she'll behave today. She was a little bit of a nuisance yesterday and played silly so-and-sos on us. Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the National Motor Museum Startup. This is something we've been doing for about the last year or so, starting up various different vehicles around the museum, and everything from the 1914 Alpine Eagle here, Ferrari, Bentley, Mercedes, the Leons. We had a Bugatti Veyron, the older ones at that back, but we started that fairly regularly. We had the 162 Honda upstairs, motorcycle riding day. We've been using it for another event, so we started up the 162 Honda, and we were handing out earplugs before we actually started up, and chap the Harley Davidson was laughing and saying, oh, he said, it's only a 250, it can't be that loud. This is stood up the front of the museum down by Palace House. It sounds absolutely beautiful. Anyway, he realised then that you actually had to put earplugs in, but this is not like that. And I apologise if I go too deep.
It's alright, I'm keeping up so far.
I'll try. Anyway. Okay, Alpine Eagle Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce had a reputation for very nice cars, but by 1914 they had started to come up against other manufacturers who were as good, if not better. So we got to do something about this, they thought themselves. So they decided to enter the Alpine Trial, where the Alpine Trial was basically an event driving up and down around the Alps. Anyone that's messed around with old motorcycles, old cars will know they thrive on attention. And in the early days, the cars were tended to be a little bit unreliable, have their own peculiarities. Well, with the Rolls-Royce, you actually had, not only with starting, but with running, you had a dual ignition system to actually make it a little bit more reliable. If you notice, you've got too many spark plugs. You've got, it's a 6-cylinder engine, and there's 12 spark plugs. On the other side of the engine is a magneto, which is a rotating armature between magnets. And it's a very good form of ignition, but it does need a bit of speed to make it turn, to make it start sparking. I'm quite a big bloke and I can't turn that starting handle fast enough to start the engine on the starting handle. So the procedure, the starter motor still hadn't been invented at the time. It was still, people were experimenting with it. So what you did, you had this device here called a trembler coil. The easiest way to describe it is a doorbell. So when you push a doorbell, instead of the doorbell ringing, it produces a high tension electric spark. So it ignites, you know, it's a very bright spark. On a 6-cylinder engine, there's one cylinder will always be just slightly over the top of TDC. And so if you turn the engine over on the starting handle, 2 or 3 turns, with a flooded carburetor, it gets there and you end up with a cylinder full of petrol and air. So the idea is, starting handle round 2 or 3 times, then make sure the ignition's retarded, turn the trembler coil on and the engine starts, very much like stop-start technology nowadays. It doesn't always work. Yesterday it would not work for love of money. Anyway, it did go in the end, but it was playing up. So, on here, you know your modern day car, you've got this mythical aluminium box, sorry. this aluminium box that gets there and is the brain of the car. It's the ECU. And costs many hundreds of pounds to put right when it goes wrong. On here, you have this lever, which does your mixture, and that lever there that does your ignition. That's all you have. The only difference is when you're driving down the road and you actually, you can sort of feel it or smell it, it'll be running hot. So if it's running hot, you'll just rinse the mixture up a bit. If you go along and you think, oh, it's running a bit smoky, you'll just lean off of it. So the car is totally stupid. It's you that has to make the car do what you want it to do. If you're going uphill and you hear it start pinking, or you can feel it pinking, you just retard your ignition slightly. If you're going along on the straight, you'll have it fully advanced. If you don't, you'll cook your engine. And if we start it now with the ignition lever in the wrong place, you end up with a lovely little bonfire under the bonnet. And it gets very embarrassing. So we won't do that. So, right now, I'm going to cheat because I messed my back up the other day, so I'm not going to turn it over and start the motor. So I'll get her to spin it over a few times on the starter motor, just get the petrol and air in. The starter motor is a very good invention. Okay. Petrol on. This is tickling the carburetor. Basically give it a very rich mixture. It's it just basically gives it a very rich mixture. One of the tricks the old chauffeurs used to do was get 20 pence and put it underneath the arm, and it just gives it a slightly richer mixture. It's cheating really, but it works. A little story, my boss one day said to me, he said, can you have a look at the Alpine? He said, it's running like a bag of nails. And, oh, sorry. Anyway, it was running very, very rough. So he said to me, he said, would you have a look at it? So you go through, you never expect to find what you expect. You always look through them, thinking to yourself, oh, I wonder what it is. Start taking the carburetor, that's the main jet, that's the slow running jet. So this jet here, I took it to bits and had a look, and I found a dead mosquito in the jet. And it hadn't been apart for at least 6 months before. So I found this dead mosquito, pulled out the jet, put it back together, it ran lovely. By the way, we do like to use these cars as much as possible. If you pass these round. That's the white one upstairs, that's the silver ghost upstairs obviously. We do like to use the cars as much as possible, and just because the cars are mollycoddled now doesn't mean to say they've always been mollycoddled. This one was originally sold to the Cunard family as a saloon, and it ended up just being used as family transport. Then over its life it ended up with this body and ended up here. The white one upstairs was actually used as a test car up at Brooklands. Then it was sold to a gentleman in Scotland. Then after he finished with it, it was used as a hearse. Then ended up being, as during the war, used as a breakdown truck. So I had a crane fit in the back. Then after the war, Edward Lord Montague got there and bought it and converted it back to a car again. So, you know, and the green one up the end actually ended up being used for putting a gang mower around a sports field, cutting grass. So, you know, they have seen life. So although we mollycoddle them now, they haven't always been mollycoddled. And this engine, by the way, keeping fingers crossed, has never been reground. It's only ever been rebored, but it's still on the original crankshaft regrind. The white one upstairs is the same. This one has done 750,000 miles approximately, and the white one upstairs has done over 1 million miles in its life. There's a lot to be said for slow big, slow-running old engines. Anyway, we'll see what happens. And if it doesn't play ball today, I can only apologise. This is me on the front. That was me on the front winding over. Okay. And it's not going to play ball. It's not going to play ball. Be nice to me. Fiddly-dee. I'm going to cheat. Sorry about this. It was playing up yesterday and it's going to play up today as well. Come on, be nice to me. This is where you find mechanics start talking funnily to motor cars. I will demonstrate starting it up in a minute. We'll see if it will do it now. Oh no. See the poor chauffeur, Rolls-Royce straight chauffeur, if it didn't go, he would be on the front there having to wind over and try it again. Then it did go. So you can see what he invented the starter mode. We do have a lot of problems with the modern day fuel. Although the lead doesn't matter, it was 1927 they started putting lead in petrol. The biggest problem we have is with the ethanol. We're having to have ethanol, the government are putting ethanol in petrol. And it causes us an awful lot of headaches. But it runs perfectly okay on it. It's just sometimes getting the go of it. It's a bit of a selling side. But it's not bad for an engine that's done 750,000 miles. When Rolls-Royce sorted this out going into the Alpine trial, some of the things they did with it, on here you've got a bigger radiator for better cooling. You got a slightly bigger carburetor, the valves was bigger, the crankshaft was better balanced. And so they basically brought the engine up to a little bit more modern style engine. Still basically the same as the Silver goes, just slightly more modern. There was lots of arguments with the manufacturers what should have, whether this is right, whether that's right. On here you'll notice it's got no front wheel brakes. Alpine, the Argon upstairs was the first manufacturer to have front wheel brakes in their cars. Some manufacturers considered front wheel brakes to be dangerous. Fortunately, that was another one of those things that everyone else, hang on a minute, this is a good idea. They were still writing the book. But some of the manufacturers had some funny ideas, but anyway, some of them closed off. We had a lady here one day asking about Formula 1 racing, motor racing. And she said, what's so important about motor racing? I said, well, if you, and the grandmother was just saying about the fact that she'd been driving in Austin 7, And she said, oh, she said it's terrible, it wouldn't go very fast, it wouldn't stop going downhill. And I said, well, that's what's so important about motor racing. Because without competition, they wouldn't have got there and it wouldn't have pushed developments so much. It's wartime and motor racing that brings on developments in the motor industry, unfortunately. You've had a war part. Anyway, the only thing is with a car like this, is you have to, it's the same problems we have nowadays with the modern day electric car. If you've got a big vehicle going down